Working Abroad show with me, Prorik Sam, living and working abroad in a rainy start of autumn. So we had the a big full moon this week, and the result of that now is we're beginning to get into autumn and into winter with the storms coming in to Europe from the Atlantic and around the world. Winter is coming, and in the UK we have a budget lined up for the end of November. So it won't be a Halloween budget, but it could still be expensive for many. But there's tax changes going on around the world. We've got Trump introducing tariffs. We're trying to break out peace throughout the world and get the Middle East issues resolved. We're trying to resolve the issues with Russia and Ukraine. All these things bring changes and demands upon government to tax, to spend, and to rejuvenate. And what's the impact on that? What we want to look at this week specifically is a broader picture of wealth taxes. What I want to do is try and identify that. We all know we can get an income tax. 60 years ago in the 1960s, the Labour government introduced capital gains taxes. Later on, inheritance taxes were introduced in the 90s as a way of taxing your income, taxing your wealth, and then taxing your estate when you died. So no matter what stage you are in terms of earning money, investing for profit, building a business and realising the gains, or dying, the government's going to take a share of tax from that. And what is the point of that? Now, there's left-wing politics, there's right-wing politics. The UK's got a particularly far-left government at the moment. Democracies always swim back to the centre, right and left. So that far-left government might be coming back to the centre. But will they introduce a wealth tax? Will they introduce a wealth tax? And why would they want to consider doing that? Well, let's have a look at that. What a wealth tax is and what a wealth tax by another name is. Actually, at the moment, in 2025, there's only five out of the five of the OECD countries around the world are actually applying a wealth tax. What a wealth tax is defined as, it's a tax not on your income, but it's a tax on capital or equity. So it's not a tax on your gain, your profit on your capital. It's not a tax on the capital gain. It's a tax, the fact that you own the money, you own a property, you own a cash pile, you've got money in the bank, you've got an insurance policy, an investment fund, a pension fund, you've got a business with a share value, you've got a share portfolio, you've got any sort of financial security, investment, be they gilts or other types of funds, or if you have you're the beneficiary of a trust fund. Whatever the source of your capital wealth, a wealth tax will tax that. Not when you sell it, not when you dispose of it, not when you die, not when you pay yourself income from it. They tax you just for owning it. And the proponents would say that for the wealth tax is that it helps distribute and redistribute wealth, stops people getting very, very rich. So it's a distinctly left-wing policy from that perspective. The alternative argument is that a wealth tax actually reduces GDP, it reduces economic growth, it reduces employment, and it has a negative recessionary effect on the economy, maybe reducing an economy by 2 to 5%, which can be a massive thing. Now, for the current British government, based upon the performance of their one budget they've done so far, that's exactly what they managed to achieve. not through wealth taxes, but by putting up employment taxes, national insurance, and by putting up indirect taxes on a number of other different funds. When a government announces that it's going to put inheritance tax on a pension fund, and it's going to put additional higher rates of capital gains tax went up by 80% from 10 to 18%. What that does, that future tax revenue, the government can then borrow against that to fund its current spending. And they just go cap in hand to the market, say, we've got more tax revenue coming from these people that are going to sell, or they're going to die in the future, or they're going to draw income. We've got that income coming. We can pay your gilts back in the future. Now, whether that's true or not is a different point, but Britain at the moment is at record levels of borrowing. It's called financially sound because the revenue is coming in, but the revenue isn't coming in from economic growth. The revenue is coming in from additional taxes, backdoor taxes, taxes that are changed from the past. So you've got your income taxes, which can be progressive, and you can see that you could pay 0% tax, or 20, or 40 or 45% tax in the UK. And the more you earn, the more you pay, which is deemed to be generally a fair way to do it. But now, if you own any wealth at all, then you're going to pay some tax if you've got a wealth tax. The countries that apply wealth tax at the moment are an interesting bunch. Colombia is the one that's out on a limb. It's the only one in America and outside Europe that are applying a wealth tax at the moment. The other countries that apply a wealth tax are France, Spain, Switzerland and Norway. Now, Norway you think are quite sensible, Switzerland are quite sensible, and they may have counterbalancing taxes in other ways, that you haven't got as high income or capital taxes, but you have got the equivalent of a wealth tax. In France, we can see what the taxation system is there doing at the moment, for sure, as the government and the economy and the whole system collapses. But then they're openly lauded as wealth taxes. But let's look at a wealth tax by another name. In Portugal, if you're a tax resident in Portugal, your income in Portugal, this is not for expats on the habitual non-resident scheme for up to 10 years. It's not for expats who maybe have got some exemptions from overseas income. But if you've got tax on Portugal income, you've got a progressive income tax rate between 13 and 48%. But there's an additional tax. And if your if your income goes over £80,000, there's additional 2.5% tax that you charge as a solidarity tax. If your income goes over £250,000, there's an additional 5% tax. So actually the top rate of tax in Portugal is not 48%, it's 53%. So that the richer you are, the wealth tax applies. So Portugal have got a solidarity tax, which by definition is a wealth tax on income. So it can be done that. An example of a flat rate tax, which could be a wealth tax, is very clear to most people. Corporation tax. Generally around the world, corporation taxes are at one level. So the UK used to have a 19% corporation tax rate. They then increased it under the last government to 25%. And now they then gave concessions to smaller businesses. So if your turnover is below 250, between 50 and 250,000 pounds a year, your corporation tax rate is progressive from 19 to 25%. So you could argue that that's a form of a wealth tax, is that the better you do, your corporation tax goes up from the norm of the previous 10, 15 years of 19% up to 25%. So something to consider there about a flat rate tax could be a form of a wealth tax that could be applied. As we've seen in France, it's partly to do with the electoral system where you've got a president that's in control for all this time, but the parliamentary elections in the meanwhile have voted the opposition into power, and therefore the president's party can't operate as a prime minister and as a government for the head of state, the president, because they've got a minority vote in the parliament, and they won't agree to a coalition, and the minority parties won't let that. And so they have this big impasse, and it's not unrelated to the UK situation where you've got general popular opinion against the far left Keir Starmer government, but they've got the majority, they've got the voting rights, they don't have to go for an election until 2029. Democracies tend to move towards the centre, and so the instability of the government and the potential rocketing government borrowing costs and social unrest that will result from this is inevitably going to force a swing back to the centre. And whether it's a presidential election for the French or another set of parliamentary elections waits to be seen for them to resolve that problem. In the UK, you can have as many marches as you like for a change of national government. That won't apply. So you've got the regional governments that apply in Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland. They could vote in different parties. Local councils could be voted into different ways, but they don't have the executive control that the British parliamentary system does, where everything is centred on that. Another type of flat rate tax that can be applied as a wealth tax is tariffs. Now, we've seen over the summer, post-Liberation Day, Donald Trump introducing a tariff system for America, not to punish people, not to keep people out, but basically to even up the odds in terms of when they're trading. So where the European Union might be charging American companies a lot of money, a lot of taxes in VAT and tariffs to import goods into the EU, the Americans weren't charging that for the BMWs and the European firms of this world to go and sell their wares in America. So the tariff system equalises that up, and they were introduced as a punitive thing, but they've essentially led to a negotiation strategy where essentially what Donald Trump is trying to do is create a level playing field, a free trading thing where there's no penalties of entry for people competing across border. He's betting that the American economy can provide jobs and industry and growth for the American people, but also trade around the world profitably. When tariffs block out the American exporters, people like Apple might go and build their phones cheaply in China and then import them into America. So, you know, taking jobs and industry away from people is a thing. EU is pretty much like that. It's the same thing. Much more bureaucratic, much more slow thinking, much more gradual in its approach. And post-Brexit, we've gradually seen an unwinding. Not very good unwinding, not very good road to independence for the UK, primarily because the government's post-Brexit last direction and the commitment to take Britain into a trading world where they could at least match their weight. They may not have the economic oomph of the USA, but still where they've got skills and expertise to export goods and services, they could have gone along, negotiated trading agreements with or without tariffs to go and trade dynamically. The problem when you come to the EU is you can't negotiate with Spain or Portugal or France or Germany or Denmark. you negotiate with the whole of the EU bloc, and they put in their tariffs, not least the famous VAT, which is a sales tax in Cyprus to generate the revenue to fund the EU. So you've got, I mean, ironically, we've got a Labour government which is filled with a front bench of people that were avid Remainers and wanted a new election to get back into the EU, although their manifesto didn't commit to that, so they've not done it so far. But they've tried to create a working relationship with the EU, and again we see how that doesn't necessarily work, because now the EU have decided that as a consequence of the renegotiations and the ordering of the world between America balancing off the discriminatory tariffs that the EU were applying to them, they've got to balance off their trade. And we see now that the EU are introducing, despite all the kind words and the nice buttering up with Keir Starmer, they've now declared that they're going to introduce tariffs on British steel being imported into the EU. So that will, again, it's going to affect British trade. So British trade is being punished for not being strong and independent and vital enough. It's a country which potentially has got coal, oil and gas resources to self-fund, but insists on buying those things from around the world and cutting trees down in the meanwhile. So the UK could be independent, could be a strong global power on fuels, oil, as an industry and as an export, but it's chosen not to go down that route at the moment. If you don't defend your strengths as a country, then all sorts of things could happen. We see with the EU as well, it's not a wealth tax as such, but you've got the Schengen zone, and this limits people to the time they can spend in the EU. So within the EU, you've got freedom of movement. So in theory, anybody from Denmark or Belgium or Germany can travel across the EU to Portugal or Spain, down into Italy, Greece or Cyprus, and they can live and work abroad. But you can't do that if you're not from the EU. The EU started giving sort of preferential rates to the UK to allow people to live and work abroad, but they've stopped that now. They're very, very, very anti anybody from around the world working within the EU. So a UK citizen finds it very hard to get a work permit around the world with countries that want to promote themselves and live and work within the Schengen zone agreement. If you've got an overseas property in the EU, if that's what your investment is, not in Florida, but in Portugal or Spain or Cyprus, the Schengen zone, what that means is that you can only spend 90 days in any 6-month period in that property. So for short business and work trips, it may well work. If you've got a holiday home in Cyprus, you might not want to spend more than 3 months at a time or in any 6-month period. But the point is your wealth is your holiday home or your second home or your Airbnb investment for property rental, holiday rental income in Cyprus or the EU. But the wealth tax stops you coming into the country as often as you would like and limits that unless you then become resident and start paying taxes locally for them. So the resident restriction, again, it's a type of wealth tax, type of limitation on what you can do, on where your money is held and how you can enjoy that. A wealth tax can be placed on cash, on bank accounts, on real estate, on insurance funds, pension funds, any type of financial investment that you've got at all. Whether you're holding funds in a trust it's the property that you own or the portfolio that you own. So how are we going to do that? It could be, for example, in the UK, they could say we're going to reorganise council tax and we're going to change it, simply make it a flat rate tax. So everybody that owns a property has to pay a flat rate tax. So a 2% tax on your property might be less than the council tax you're paying at the moment, less than municipal taxes you're paying at the moment, less than the stamp duty you pay to buy and sell the property, or any capital gains on it, but it could add up to be a lot more money. 1% of 100 is £1. 1% of 1,000 is 10. 1% of 10,000 is 1,000. So it quickly starts to, 10% of 10,000 is 1,000. So it quickly starts to add up an additional amount of money. And if you've got a fixed asset, a property that's not generating revenue, and suddenly you have to pay that wealth tax, it's diminishing your wealth. You're either paying that out of taxed income, or you're having to sell your asset to do that. So if you've got a share portfolio worth $1 million, and the government want to get their 1% of that million, then where are you going to get that 1% from? So you're going to get that 10,000. You're going to have to sell 10,000 worth of shares a year with the buying and selling costs of that to pay that wealth tax on that £1 million share portfolio. We've already seen the proposal that's been confirmed that they're introducing inheritance tax on your pension fund when you die. But if a tax-hungry government wants more money to spend now, why not tax it now? So this is another issue that we've got. A left of centre is not necessarily a wealth tax, but it could be deemed to be a wealth tax. But it could be that the government decides to change what they're doing and say, well, you've got a pension fund. It's a UK pension fund. It's tax entity in the UK. Therefore, if you go and live and work abroad, even in a country with a double taxation treaty, then we're going to stop you taxing that, having that pension taxed in the country of your location. So if you're in the UK and you've got a pension fund, you can draw income and pay up to 45% income tax on that fund each year. Or you cannot draw any income, but now if you die, you have to pay 40% of that towards inheritance tax. So if you don't draw and pay some income tax, you're going to pay inheritance tax. But what about if they stopped you moving that pension, having it taxed in another country? So if you go and live in certain countries, you can get a lower tax rate. So in Cyprus, there has been for 25 years and more, a flat rate overseas pension tax of 5%. Okay, now that's 5% revenue that goes to Cyprus. If you're a Cyprus tax resident, they don't pay any more. Whether you've got a 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million pound pension withdrawal that year, it's still only a 5% tax. So it's a way round the British government having introduced a 40% inheritance tax. Will they block it? Will they create a wealth tax by tying you in your pension fund into the UK, and therefore your wealth tax is going to be, when you die, you've got an extra 40% to pay on your pension fund. You can't now leave that to your widow tax-free for them to have taxable income during their life. So tax on income, tax on capital gains and wealth are two ways of traditionally getting capital for governments. Inheritance taxes are very much a feature of the 20th century, but now potentially wealth taxes is the next level. Not a tax when you earn income, not a tax when you realise a profit, not a tax when you die, but a tax the fact that you own money or own an asset valuable. Whether you've got cash for that or not, a tax that's chargeable each year that you own that asset. the different types of ways it can be done. We wait to see, but if you consider that you might have assets in your business, property, investments or earnings or pensions that are potentially attack on a tax creep from a wealth tax perspective, in addition to inheritance tax and capital gains, then consider relocating overseas and holding your assets in such a way to protect your family and business and property overseas while you're living and or working abroad. Contact us at proactpartnership.com. We can help and guide you and give you that advice. And if you want to take help, then we can do that as well. What we want is to pay the right amount of tax fairly and freely. But high tax countries, low tax countries, we need to make that decision. Where do you want to be living and working abroad? Contact us to discuss the ideas and the options available to you. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you again next time.